welcome to Board Stupid, with a podcast that loves talking tabletop, board games, D&D, and other awesome stuff. I'm Tom.
And I'm Simon.
We're just a couple of nerds talking about the things that we love and that are worth geeking out over. So Simon, if you're ready, let's dive into this week's episode. This week, we played Point City. We played as a series where we talk about an epic board game that we played this week. This week, it's the resource drafting, card flipping, tableau building Point City. In this episode, we'll be diving into the things that we liked and breaking down the elements that make it great, because at the end of the day, we only play awesome games. And Point City is a clever little resource management twist on card drafting. Point City is a card drafting, engine building game with more than 150 unique building cards, giving you the opportunity to create a completely different city each time you play. The rules are simple. You take 2 adjacent cards from a dynamic city grid and add them to your expanding city. You use the resource cards and bonuses to construct building cards that require specific combinations of resources. You build special civic structures to multiply your city's points, and you have to be the top urban planner. Point City plays 1 to 4 players. It is designed by Molly Johnson, Robert Melvin, and Sean Stankovic. 3 designers for one little game.
Yeah, it's kind of striking to see 3 names on it, but I'll allow it because it's awesome.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Art is by Dylan Mangini and published by Flatout Games. It plays in approximately 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, I smashed through a game of this in probably less than that because I was
play it fast.
Played with an aggressive Scottish person and they were like, your turn. I'm like, dude, slow down.
Pick a card. And it retails for approximately £20. You can get a little bit cheaper from somewhere like Zatu.
Yeah, I think I got this a shade under 20 quid.
Yeah, it's a nice little box. Carry it with you. Take it to the pub, maybe.
Take it to the office.
I
have been on a mission, Tom, to get everybody to play games with me.
Slowly convert everyone.
And the number of times I've had people go, I won't play, I'm rubbish. I'm like, have you played this? No. Have you heard of it? No. That you can't be rubbish at something you've neither played nor even heard of. Come and play a game with me.
You can't be rubbish, I will teach you. This is great. We go back like 5 years, Simon, and you never would have dreamed this.
Well, that I'd be the one forcing people to play games.
Yes.
I mean, I always had an passing interest in games. I just hadn't really had the exposure to the wonders of the modern gaming world.
And now there you are, teaching people at work.
Yeah, running my board games club.
Lovely.
It was great.
So, let's talk a little bit about Point City's components and art design. Point City is basically a little box filled with cards.
Big old stack of cards.
Lovely double-sided cards.
Super, super vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
The back side is resources, one of 5 types, or the wild card, ingenuity.
Yep.
And the front, as you said, is a bunch of buildings, tiered 1 through 3. Really kind of, I don't want to say cutesy design, but
yeah, they are sort of slightly cartoony little building designs, right?
Yeah, not overly complicated, but very characterful, I would say.
So the cards are tiered, right? So you seat the deck with a stack of tier 1 cards, tier 2 cards, and tier 3 cards. They have a slightly different like background shade to the buildings, which is really clever way of sort of easily telling them apart. And on the back side where you have the resources, you can see that, you know, they get more powerful as you proceed through the game to tier 2 and tier 3 cards.
Yeah, you'll end up with some double resource cards. They're incredibly vibrant. So you've got ecology, community, industry, energy, and economy. Okay, you might not remember all of those. There's 3 E's in there.
Green, purple, orange.
Pink and yellow. Super bright. And that's all you need to look for, really. It doesn't matter what they're called. Yeah. They're bright.
You pointed this out to me when we played, but the building palettes, the colours of the buildings are tied to the different types of building suits. Right?
Yeah, the resources that the card requires to build the building is the colour of the building.
Yeah, so the roof might be yellow for a building that, orange for a building that requires energy.
That's it. Yeah.
Which is a really like clever little thing that you might not immediately notice, but having pointed it out to me, I was like, oh, that's really clever. That's a nice little design element that they've done with the art.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite little bits. The bright yellow observatory, I think, was the thing that caught my eye.
Yes, all yellow.
This one's all yellow.
Oh,
and that one's all yellow. Oh, it's because they need all coins and nothing else.
Yes.
Yeah, great little touch.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So you get 150 cards, and then you have a varying number of cards in the deck, tier 1, 2, and 3, depending on the number of players.
Yes, enough so that each player will take 17 turns exactly.
That's right, yeah. So it's intended to be a fixed length, not necessarily fixed duration, depending on number of players.
Yeah, time will be varied depending on how long people take to pick.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that. In addition to the cards, you get a little stack of cardboard civic tokens.
Yeah, these are your bonus tokens, which you can pick up when you're building certain types of buildings.
And the civic tokens sort of function like little bonus objectives for getting extra points by building sets of suited cards.
Yeah,
right?
2 points for every building you've built with a permanent pink resource, or
For
3
example.
points for every pair of pink and yellow buildings
Yeah,
you've built, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Which can be easier said than done.
Yeah, but the iconography is nice and clear on those. There's a couple I had to quickly double check and went, oh yeah, of course it means that.
Yeah,
There aren't
yeah.
really that many options.
There's not a huge amount of iconography. Other than the different resources, those are the main icons, right? There's not a lot else.
No, it's almost exactly that. They are both different colours and have a very distinct shape or pattern to them as well. So the energy is both orange, but also a lightning bolt. The industry is bright pink, but also a cog. You can't not differentiate these. Even with any colourblind issues, you will know that card is that thing, as well as obviously having the wording written on the resource side of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much, it's essentially language independent, right? You do have a little bit of language on some of the civic tokens, but
Yes.
the cards themselves, I mean, they do have names, right? They have names,
The
they do have
buildings
names.
themselves are named, but the names are irrelevant to the gameplay. So
Yes.
in that sense, if outside of the couple of bonus tokens that require you to understand the meaning of them, but again, easily translated into
Easily
your
translated.
and you could write it on a post-it note what those few tokens mean. The others are 2 per icon. It's that nice and straightforward.
Easy. And then you get a little box, and that's it. That's the whole game.
It's the whole game, nice and simple.
What do you think about the production value overall?
I think it's great. It's super appealing. I played this at the club back in October, I think it was.
Yeah.
A couple of the folks there brought it along, and I was kind of on the lookout for it ever since. It was
Mm.
really, really visually appealing to me, even if I hadn't picked up on that colour combo for the building type, even at that point.
It's a nice little Easter egg that you found later
Yeah.
on.
I think the production is great. The cards are, for me, are very high quality. They've not got a linen finish. I don't think you need a linen finish.
No, and we are talking about a game that's about £20. So
Yeah.
I think it's exactly what you would expect for that sort of cost. It's a pocket game. It's a bag game that you can easily transport around. And I think it does. It doesn't have a bunch of superfluous tokens that would be make the cost of the game more.
Yeah, it doesn't need any more. It's not missing out on anything. Some people say, why is it 20 quid for a deck of cards? Like, well, because there's design elements in there. You're paying for the creation of the game, not just the physical component.
I think it's very clever because you've got it's clever because you've got the double-sided cards. The cards are both buildings and resources. It reminds me of something like Port Royal.
Mm-hmm.
We have a single deck of cards, and the cards are both the resources and the tableau building or engine building portion of the game.
Yeah.
Which is very, very good. Nice sort of condensed mechanisms and plays really cleverly. So let's jump into the way that the mechanics of the game work. Simon, how do we win a game of Point City?
As you may imagine, it's the most points, as with a number of games. But
Something to do with points in your city, maybe?
Absolutely, points in your city,
Okay.
yeah. So you're looking to build a whole bunch of buildings. These are found on the reverse of the grid that you first start with. So the game starts with 16...
A 4x4 grid, right?
Yep, 4x4 grid. I want to say face up, but they're double-sided. So the
Resource side up.
resource side up is absolutely the way I should be describing it. You won't know what buildings are on the back of them. It doesn't matter what buildings are on the back of the cards you pick up, because you pick up and maintain the side that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you pick a pair of cards, and a pair is just 2 cards that are orthogonally adjacent to each other.
Which sounds simple,
It is.
but gets much more complicated very quickly.
Yes. And this is the really cool thing for me, and I really like this. When you pick up a pair of resources, they are replaced from the top of the deck with 2 buildings.
They flip.
Because they come the other way out.
Yeah.
If you pick up a building and a resource, they are replaced with a resource and a building in that order.
Yeah. So the cards when you replenish them, they always flip to the opposite side, which means that if you want to pick up 2 resources, you'll end up with 2 buildings in those spaces that you've just picked from, and potentially make it more difficult to draft those 2 positions, because you always have to pick 2 cards that are adjacent to one another.
Yes, the way the sweeping changes come across the tableau of the main grid is so good, because you do, as you say, start out wanting just resources.
Start
so
with loads of resources on the board. Great, I'll just take this card and this card. There's 2 resource cards. No problem.
On everyone's turn, buildings are revealed, and you go, okay, so that building needs an orange and a yellow, does it? Okay. So on my turn, I'm going to draw an orange and a yellow, so I'll be able to pick up that building. But by the time it gets back to you, that might have been drafted, but then there's a green and a purple available. So.
Or you end up with a building that's suddenly surrounded by other buildings, and you're like, okay, I really want this building that's in the middle. I can afford that building. Oh, hold on, I need to take a second card. I can't afford to buy any of the buildings that are adjacent to it.
Yeah.
I can't pick that option.
Late game, it really does get locked in. As you say, you're only ever going to have a certain amount of resource, and you might get shut out in the perfect option. The building you really want is maybe in a corner, and the cards above it and the card to the right of it are buildings you don't have the resources for.
It happened a lot, particularly as you get to the tier 2 and tier 3 cards. It can get to the point where you realise that there's basically no card combinations that you can pick up, and you might be forced to essentially sort of, go and scrimp and just take random cards from the deck instead.
Yeah, that's the kind of the backup option, or an alternative if you want to go to early doors. You can just take the top 2 cards.
And they're always going to be resources.
Always going to be resources, yeah. The deck is entirely resource side up.
It's probably worth specifying that you can't mix and match.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to take from the deck, you can't take one from the deck and one from the board. If you're taking from the tableau of cards, the grid, you're always taking 2 that are adjacent to each other, and that can get quite tricky.
Yeah. This might already sound a little complicated. I promise you it's not. I have taught this to probably a dozen people in work. At least half of them have been of the aforementioned. I don't understand how games work. I won't play. No, let me show you. I got my arse kicked by at least one of them. In fact, I've lost at least twice that I can think of within the last 2 weeks in work.
You're getting to that position where you are cursed with the burden of teaching people games, and you have become bad at games.
Yeah, well, I don't think I've become bad. I'm a good teacher. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
So you pick 2 resources. 2 buildings become available. By the time it gets back to you, there'll be a whole mixture of resources and buildings available.
There might be 8 buildings out or fewer, or a mix and match of buildings and resources. Yeah.
On your turn, you want to buy a building that has a requirement of 1 orange and 1 yellow. So you spend the orange and yellow that you have in your hand, and you don't need to hold the cards in hand.
You can just leave them out.
I have them spread out in front of me. They're my resources to spend. No one can mess with them. No one can really look across the table and go, they're going to want that building because they've...
Yeah.
Very
you could
advanced
theoretically
play.
Look at what other people have, but to be honest, it's enough of a puzzle that you just worry about what you're doing.
But let's imagine this building, orange and yellow is its requirement. So you can pick that building up by spending your orange and yellow from in hand. Above it happens to be a green ecology card. You pick those up as a pair. They're replaced, as I say, other side up. So the ecology card, its space is filled with a building.
Yep.
The building you bought is replaced with a resource, and play passes around. Now, where the points come from are either printed on that building are just raw points.
Yeah, lots of buildings are just worth points, and they don't do anything else.
Yep, you score those at the end of the game. Or it might alternatively have a small civic token marker on it. That means you can pick up one of the many civic tokens that we mentioned earlier. And
these are, again, they're randomized, right? You get a lot more civic tokens than you will use for the game.
Yep, so you're playing with 10, 12 or 14, depending on your player count.
And when you take a building that gives you a civic token, you get to pick from the available remaining civic tokens.
That's exactly it.
Which might be something that will give you points, based on types of buildings that you have or pairs of buildings that you have. It can be a little bit tricky to decide which civic you might want to take, particularly if you pick up civic buildings at the beginning. Yeah. And we did notice that the tier 1 cards have the cheapest civic buildings. But you're also taking the biggest gamble because you have no idea what other suits of cards you might end up with when it comes to the buildings at the end of the game.
That's exactly it, yeah. So the other thing that you'll note on a lot of the cards, not all of them, but along with either having the points symbol or the civic symbol or nothing at all in the top right corner, in the top left is a permanent resource tag, one of the 5 types. Not all of the cards have them. Some of them don't give you an ongoing resource, but a lot of them give you one of the 5 ongoing resources. So if I build, for example, this treehouse, it costs me my orange and yellow. And in the top left corner, it's got a little community, the little purple token.
Yep.
That means every time it comes to my turn, I have 1 purple resource token to spend
You have like
at will.
It's like a floating resource that you have in addition to cards that you might spend.
That's exactly it.
Right.
You can only use it once per round, so you can't.
Yeah, per buy, you can only spend it once,
Yep.
but it never goes away. You don't lose it.
Yeah. So one of the really key, clever things about this game is building up your city, not only for the buildings that give you points, but for the buildings that give you ongoing passive resources.
Yeah.
I've seen people completely run away with this, and they've managed to get an incredible economy.
If you happen to have, a couple of each type of resource and you can get a nice flexible engine, you're always in a position to be able to nab 1 or 2 buildings at a time without having to worry about the cost. And that chance of getting in a position where you're sort of paralyzed and you can't pick up the buildings that you want because you can't afford the ones adjacent to them, the risk is much lower.
Yeah. So you can you have your passive resource in hand. You then can still pick up resources from the play space. Gives you all the flexibility you need. But yeah, I've seen people that have had, they've been able to just buy, I can get this one. It needs 2 pink and 2 orange. I've got those already built. And this one needs a green and 2 purple. I've got those already built. And they're just picking up pairs of more buildings every turn. I'm like, I can barely get one.
And it is random, right? You might not necessarily have the right resources. You might have picked to build the buildings that are the wrong colour for the buildings that have come out in the grid.
Yes, yeah, I've ended up with like 4 energy, permanently built, passive spend, and everything's wanted community or ecology. I'm like, well, I'll be on a slow grind to that then.
Yeah.
Buildings do become more expensive to buy or build the later on in the game.
So you do want to invest in the sort of engine building part because you can get to a point where it's very easy to not be able to afford anything.
Yeah, I think it's vital. If you're on the slow track where you're spending resource cards every time to buy a building, it's definitely the slower route. You need to work out, and I think that's the thing. But it's so, I'm going to use the word organic again. People naturally realize once you've said to them the simple explanation, they go, okay, yeah. So if I get this one now, I can do that next time.
It's great. It flows really quickly.
You can really see people's cogs starting to whir, even those who are otherwise entirely unfamiliar with that kind of game. And you see it clicking them, and they go, okay, yeah.
The color coding on the cards and it being a relatively simple set of symbology really helps with that. It makes it easy to assimilate.
100%, yeah. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to... I mean, it was a pleasure to lose to people who are so excited and so able to quickly pick up on the design aspect of this. It was so delightful.
Great. So the BGG rating for this is about 1.7.
Yeah.
It's not a heavy game at all. It plays in 15 to 30 minutes. Certainly towards the lower end if you're playing with just 2 players or you've played it a few times.
Yeah, if you're familiar with it, you can spam through it pretty quick. It's an easily repeatable game as well. A lot of times these smaller, quicker games, I'm like, okay, I've played it. This one I'll quite happily play 2, 3 full rounds.
Yeah, I think you can play quite a few rounds back to back. You can easily reset and reseed the deck with different tiered cards. You can change out cards for new cards. You can change out civic tokens for new civic tokens and get a nice mix each time you play. You're never going to get the same setup each time.
I can't imagine what the incalculable variations are.
Impossibly.
Not only in the initial layout, but then each pickup you could do top left and the one next to it, or position 2 and 3, position 3 and 4, position 4 and 8, position 3 and so many iterations. You will see a different combo and pattern come out every time.
Absolutely.
There is an optional rule where if an entire row or column is resource side up, you can flip one of them to a building to give you a bit more variability. You can't flip buildings back over to resources.
No, you get stuck if they're all buildings. You have to start taking cards blind from the deck.
But I've very rarely seen anyone be fully locked out of an option. I really haven't seen it more. I had it once on my very last turn of a
fully
game.
locked out. Yeah.
I couldn't buy a single building. But that was it.
I think
Once
when we played
game.
right at the very end, I had one round when I couldn't, and I had to take from the deck. But like you say, if it's 17 rounds and you find right at the very end you get stuck for one round, it probably hasn't necessarily made the game.
No, it's highly unlikely that one option.
And it's quite unlikely.
Unless there was, a 7-point building and you happen to be 6 points behind. But
Yeah.
And then you just play again because it's a quarter of an hour game.
It's not a long game. No, absolutely. So in terms of the theme of this game, I think we can probably talk a little bit more about the wider Point universe of games, right?
Point universe, yeah.
Does this feel thematic? Yeah, I mean, I like the theme.
I know.
Yeah. Do you think the theme and the gameplay are strictly interlinked?
No.
No, I don't think so.
As I say, I really, really like the styling.
Yeah.
But it is largely irrelevant
So
to the game.
The same designers, we were looking at this just before we started recording, the same designers put out Point Salad originally, which has a similar mechanism for the card drafting, except the reverse of the cards are different scoring mechanisms.
Yeah, I'm really curious to try that one. Supposedly that's an even lighter game than this one.
Yeah,
or 1.17 or something on the BGG.
It's suited resources and then scoring mechanisms on the other side.
I think that's...
Change your scoring mechanisms over the course of the game.
Yeah, so you don't have the ongoing passive resource, but you choose how you score them, which is really cool.
Which is clever. It's like the civic mechanics, the civic token mechanics, but built into the other side of the card. And then they're also working on Point Galaxy.
Yeah, I think that's coming to crowdfunding in April or May, I believe.
Right. But I wouldn't be surprised to find the same sort of core mechanisms again. So there you go. It's proven immediately that you can take this card drafting mechanic, rather than just being a straight up simple card draft, you add to it an additional layer of complexity with having to pick pairs of adjacent cards and having a resource mechanism to it with the double-sided cards.
I think the restriction of adjacency is pivotal to the working of this game. If you could pick up any two that you like from the grid, it wouldn't work.
I constantly tried to. Yeah. And
it's a little mind-bending for games where you can generally pick up wherever you like to just say no, it has to be a touching pair.
No, and it's not just that, it's you must take two cards and they must be adjacent. It's
and
not
affordable.
Up to two cards. I want this one card and I'll just skip the other card. No, you can't skip it. You must buy one of its neighbours. If you can't buy one of its neighbours, you don't get the card that you want.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's really clever. The Galaxy one, I was just looking, it sounds very cool because it introduces sequencing. So you want a star and the planet and meteors and so on with certain numerical coding.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to be a little bit more complex by the sounds of it.
All right. Well,
and
we'll have to come back to that.
I am here for it. I'm hoping it'll be at Expo if it's not been released by then.
Might well.
We'll have to go and see. I don't know. Flat Out themselves aren't generally there, but I think they have a.
They'll probably be
through
Asmodee
or AEG.
Through another. Yes. Right. In terms of turn length and game flow, I think we've touched on this already. Super quick.
Yeah. To the point where I could barely keep up with my opponent.
I think it's definitely possible to get a little bit of analysis paralysis when you get towards the end of the game, and you might find that you can't necessarily take the cards that you want in combination.
Yeah, if there isn't an immediate choice, you might have to process a little the options available to you, but even then it's going to be less than a minute.
I had a few rounds where you go, okay, well, I want this card. I can't take any of the cards around it. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, do I want a different card? Oh, I can't take any of those cards either. Like trying to work your way around the board, trying to work out if you can actually buy something. But I think that's not necessarily a failing of the game. I think that was a failing of me playing the game. So.
Yeah, you can't really account for how the board will be presented to you when it gets to you. So it's very much see what you can do on your turn.
It does change quite quickly. Right?
You are able to, and I will point this out, you're able to pick up one resource on one building and spend that resource on the building you're picking up at the time.
You effectively do the two picks in sequence in the order of your choosing, right?
Yeah,
so
effectively.
You could take the resource and then buy the building adjacent to it if that would allow you to buy it.
What you can't do, and I did mess this up once in a game, is
cheating.
No, not cheating, just an overlap, and not to my benefit, I'll add.
Okay.
You can't spend the permanent resource on a building you're building until you built it, i.e. on a subsequent turn.
Yes. It doesn't go into the pool. You have to have that building at the start of the turn.
Yeah. So I messed that up and allowed someone to cascade into horrific beating of me.
Oh no. Yeah. Okay. Clarity of rules then. I mean, it's not exactly a heavy rule book, is it?
No, it little more than a pamphlet, really, nor need it be any more detailed.
It was a handful of pages.
It covers everything you need. Everything's clear. The civic tokens aren't
Some of them are not
expressly
super clear.
detailed,
No.
but there is this is how these would score kind of table, which it just needs a bit of analysis to work out, okay, that's what that's doing.
I don't
rather
think
than explicitly giving you every single
No.
token spelt out.
None
It's
of the
fine.
civics require more than a second look.
Yeah.
They're reasonably easy to figure out.
They are also, for backup, fully explained on BGG.
So the game absolutely respects your time.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, well, final thoughts then, Simon. What do you most like about Point City? Is there anything that you don't really like about Point City?
There is nothing immediately, certainly for what it is, what it's trying to do. There's nothing I don't like. Some say it's a little fiddly to have to count out the number of cards for your player count.
Yeah.
I don't care about that in the slightest. Games need prep.
The seeding is not super heavy. It's probably more set up than one might expect from a game that is basically just a single deck of cards.
Yeah.
Right, because you are effectively talking about 3 sets of cards, and you need to make sure you've got the right number of cards from each tier, and then you need to stack them. Yeah, so there's a little bit of setup, but it's not very complicated.
I'll allow it, but really you're taking out a handful. You're playing with 24, or you're taking...
If you're playing with 4 players, you're counting out a handful of cards rather than...
You know, it's the same as like with Cascadia. You play with 43, you take out 42. Like, all right, fine. It doesn't matter if I've got to take some tiles out. It's just the thing that allows me to play this awesome game.
Yeah. For me, I love the brain-bending puzzle once the grid starts to change. As the game goes on and you get sort of halfway through the game and you realise that you now need to be a lot more careful with your resource planning. I think it's really, really clever when you get to the point where you realise you can't just freely pick cards anymore.
Yeah, you're not just spamming and grabbing whatever you can. You have to look ahead a little to what is available and think, okay, yeah, this will give me points, but this will give me passive spending power. Either can be leveraged in very good ways. So, yeah.
And I think there is a little bit of room there to potentially, try and pay attention to what other people are building, what civics people have picked, maybe try and take away some of the cards that they might want. It's not direct player interaction, but there's sort of indirect because it's drafting from a shared grid.
Yeah,
market.
if you're not teaching someone the game, you might view your opponent's tableau and go, okay, they're likely based on their passive spend to be able to pick up this card. It would also benefit me because, again, you don't want to go out of your way to just draft away something for the sake of it.
The game is not long enough to hate drafts.
No.
That's for sure.
Although I bet people will try.
We'll play some more and I'll probably get there. So, Simon, who's this game for?
Everybody. Everyone I work with is going to...
everybody that I come in contact with will be forced to learn this game.
No, it's become my go-to backpack game at the moment. I've played it, I think 9 times this year.
It's an easy backpack game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super accessible. It is quick to set up, honestly.
Yeah, it's quick.
Quick to teach because it's pick up 2 cards and then you will see what happens. I don't really even need to tell you. You'll see what happens.
Easy to teach, and I think there's enough meat there for people who want to get to grips with the puzzle as well.
Well, yeah, you're a guy who likes 4+ on your weight rating.
Yeah.
I'm a mid-heavy.
Yeah, if the game rounds up to
enjoyer.
5, I'm happy.
And we are sat here happily discussing and enjoying a game with a sub 2 on the complexity weighting. So.
Everybody needs a palate cleanse,
yeah.
And I do think it has a clever little puzzle in it. It's a little twist on card drafting. There's a lot of games that have just sort of relatively simple card drafting mechanics and the introduction of a second layer with some resource management, and the implementation of that adjacency rule, I think, is very clever.
Yeah, it's got the randomization that any game with a deck of cards will have without it being an entirely random game. I think there's a lot of thought available in there, even if you work instinctually.
So do you have a final word and a final rating for us?
I would give this 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5?
Yeah, it's real good. As I say, I played it that one time. I've been looking out for it since. There's not many games.
I think that's a good review. Right?
Yeah,
that's a good review.
Not a lot of games will sit in the back of my head going, check the price on that again. There's a few, but not a huge number.
I think I'd probably need to play this more to firm up my opinion, but I would definitely put this at sort of a 3.5 to 4. I think the puzzle is clever. I like a small package game because it's easy to transport, and I always do need to have some, despite my leanings towards much heavier games. Everyone needs a break.
Yeah, I think unless you are fully hardcore, won't ever play anything that's not super heavy, I think you'd struggle to not enjoy this game.
Exactly, and I'm never going to get to 1,200 games a month if I don't play Point City 500 times. Thanks for listening to Bored Stupid. If you like what we do, please remember to subscribe to us for updates and get future episodes of the show from all good podcast services. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram, as well as on YouTube, where you'll see all the interviews from Matt and Wayne, as well as game reviews, unboxings, and other discussions. Just search for @BoredStupidUK, and we are bound to pop up everywhere. If you like our content, do us a favour and give us a 5-star review wherever you can review us, and share the links to the episodes on social media, or tell a friend and talk to us. If you've got any feedback or questions, stick it in the comments or get in touch on our socials. We'd love to hear from you. If you played Point City, have you wrapped your head around the card flipping resource management and snagged the right civics to boost your points? Or did you get stuck scrimping for scraps? Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again real soon.
I have the resources, Tom. I'm building this treehouse and ice cream van, and there's nothing you can do to stop me.